Welcome into One of One Sports. We're entering the final stretch of this college football season. Some huge games this weekend with huge playoff implications, especially in the SEC with Bama, LSU, Georgia, Ole Miss. We're going to break it all down. But first, how did we do last weekend? And it was a pretty good week. We went 8-2 overall, improved to 70-29. But another 5-0 weekend on our game breakdowns to get to 39-11, almost at 80% there. We got Ohio State over Penn State right. We predicted South Carolina to upset Texas A&M, and we predicted SMU over Pitt, some of the biggest ones. But we got all the breakdowns right. Let's see if we can do it again. Another 5-0 weekend, get well over 80%. You'd love to see it. But starting off with the non-breakdowns, just the notable games I'm handing out. These are, the closer ones, maybe not as significant in terms of playoff impact. Not going to get a full breakdown, but I'll give out my pick. And starting off, I think Iowa State bounces back, beating Kansas. They're on the road here and only a 3-point favorite. And Kansas was playing the last time we saw them was playing better, almost upsetting Kansas State. Could they pull a big upset here over Iowa State? I don't think so. Iowa State's been so good in close games. Even this last game, they took the lead. It was just the defense couldn't hold on. But Rocco Beck and that offense in the clutch has played really well. So I think even if this one's close, this time he would find a way to come through. But in general, I think they're just going to respond pretty well, win this one. I think they're 3-point favorites. I'd go at least 7 or 8-point win here. I'm pretty confident Iowa State to get this one. Next up, I got ASU over UCF. Not UCF's pretty much fallen out of the Big 12, but ASU's still sneakily alive in that Big 12 title race. They're a long shot, but still partly alive. Last week we predicted them to Oklahoma State. They got a big win by, I think, 21 points there. I think they're 3-point favorites again against UCF. I see another big win. I don't like the way UCF's been playing. I think they've had a decent game this weekend, but in general, having to switch from KJ Jefferson to Ja'Cory Brown, the lack of passing attack, over reliance on the run game, I don't think it's going to bode well against ASU, and I think ASU is going to win this game again, more than 3 in my opinion. Third, we got Oklahoma over Missouri. This was a tough one. Pretty sure Brady Cook will not be playing, and if he is, I would switch this pick to Missouri. But I'm expecting Drew Pine here. Low-scoring game, neither offense. With Drew Pine, Missouri was shut out by Alabama, who's a defense a lot of people, including myself, have had questions about. So this Missouri offense is not explosive at all with Drew Pine at quarterback, and this Oklahoma offense not explosive either, and their defense is equipped to stop Missouri. So I expect a really low-scoring game, but I do think Oklahoma's improved since going back to Jackson Arnold. I never thought they should have gone away from him, and they have been dealing as the season's gone along, and they've had to deal with all these injuries. They're better adapting to them as it goes along. Maybe some people come back, they get a little healthier, but in general, I like Oklahoma just slightly in this game in a low-scoring affair. 20-17, maybe even lower scoring. I don't think there's going to be a ton of points here, but I think it'll be close, low scoring. Oklahoma will win. Next up, I think Virginia. This one's an upset pick. Pitt's like a 7-point favorite, but I think the way they got beat against SMU, losing their undefeated season, I think it kind of compounds. And Virginia's coming off a bye, this kind of crazy. They're off a 3-game losing streak, where they were playing well in the early part of the season. They kind of fell apart, got blown out by North Carolina, kind of shockingly because North Carolina had been playing pretty bad. And now they get a bye week. I think they're actually going to regroup, respond from that 3-game losing streak and what was the worst game of their season against North Carolina. I think Pitt is looking like maybe not. They're a little bit disappointed, overlooking Virginia potentially, and I think Virginia gets the outright upset in this game. And finally, I got BYU beating Utah to remain undefeated. Obviously, Cam Rising's been out for the year. I just don't think this Utah team has the firepower to keep up with BYU. They lost to Houston and could only put up 14. So I think BYU is going to put up more than enough points to outscore Utah in this one and remain undefeated. Only a 4-point favorite. Again, a line I think is too small personally. But getting into our game breakdowns, we start with arguably the biggest game of the day, and that's going to be Georgia at Ole Miss. Just last weekend, we did breakdowns for both of these teams. We thought Georgia, we pretty much nailed the Georgia-Florida game. Said it was going to be close throughout, and then Georgia was going to tack on take the lead late, tack on a late touchdown, and end up looking like, I think we predicted 15. It ended up being 14, but pretty much nailed how that game was going to go. Ole Miss, on the other hand, did not see the historic performance on offense they had. Talking about Jackson Dart throwing for 515 and 6 touchdowns. Watkins going for over 250 and 5 touchdowns from a receiving standpoint. With no Trey Harris was really impressive. And I thought Arkansas was going to be a lot more competitive in that game. Breaking down this game, though, we can get into the keys to the game. And the first one I want to talk about, and I think the really obvious one, is Carson Beck's ball security. After the Clemson game, Georgia's had 3, I think, marquee, high-profile games. So you had the Alabama game where he throws the interceptions early. And I feel like since then, he's just been playing kind of reckless, making poor decisions. He got a second chance against Texas. They won, but again, 3 interceptions. And then Florida, high-profile rivalry game, 3 interceptions. So the hat trick of hat-trick interception games, right? He's been a turnover machine. And on the road against Ole Miss, with a pass rush like they have, a D-line like they have, Perkins, Pegwes, Umanian, Nolan, Ivy, it's a really good defensive line. Could disrupt Beck, force him to make some bad decisions. I'm expecting at least 1 interception, probably 2. I'm betting he doesn't have a fourth 3 interception game. But the way he's been making poor decisions, it's possible, and that could cost him in a game like this. And I know, against Florida, you were fine because you were playing against a third-string quarterback most of the game. And against Texas, Georgia's O-line and D-line were so dominant on line scrimmage that you were able to get through it as well. But you might not have that level of advantage against Ole Miss, and that's the danger of the way Carson Beck's playing right now. Second, are we going to get the best version of Georgia? I touched on this a little bit in the Florida breakdown, where I said if Georgia was focused, then Georgia would easily win this game. But I thought looking ahead to Ole Miss, they wouldn't come out and play their best ball. This game, after the Florida game, you get a little bit of a scare, and this is a big one on the road against a top team where I'm sure people are going to be predicting Ole Miss to win. I think that bodes well for Georgia because I think when the big game happens, they get up a little bit more typically, assuming they're not playing Alabama because, Kirby Smart really struggles there. But our third key to the game is going to be the Ole Miss receivers. We saw what Watkins did in a historic performance against Arkansas, and that was without Trey Harris, who's arguably the best wide receiver in the country. If he plays, they're especially dynamic. Juice Wells, dynamic option. If Pierce Corn's there, a really good option at tight end. And the way Jackson Dart's been playing, that's going to be a huge test for this Georgia secondary if Ole Miss is fully healthy. And you got Lane Kiffin over there calling plays, knows Kirby Smart's defense a little bit. It's being a good matchup to watch. I would expect Ole Miss to win a decent amount of matchups against this Georgia secondary and be able to put up points in a much better fight than they did last year in this game. And finally, I think the Ole Miss run game, because if they can't establish the run against Georgia, kind of how Texas couldn't, and sometimes Georgia dominates up front, and then you're reliant on the passing game, Georgia can rush the passer more, disrupt Dart, and then I think things get tricky for you. So I think you don't have to be running it down their throat the whole game, but establish a pretty good run game. Something they've been able to do at times this year, but not consistently throughout the season. So who am I taking? This one is really tough for me. I was probably about 60-40 on this. Part of me thinks Ole Miss receivers are just going to be able to put up a lot of points. The way they played last week was really impressive. Part of me thinks this Georgia team, though, just gets up for when they're doubted in these big spots and has been so good against SEC teams not named Alabama that ultimately I had to go with that even on the road. 31-24, tight one. Second game we're going to break down is Clemson versus Virginia Tech. Maybe not the most marquee matchup, but we know Clemson went down unexpectedly last week. It was tough to find a fifth game. I think this one could be tight on the road to Virginia Tech. Let's break it down. My first key to the game, speaking of Clemson going down, is their team morale. When you're rolling like they were 6-1, borderline top 10 team, and then off a bye to get beat in the fashion they did at home against a Louisville team who was, not well rested, not expected to win. Does this team respond the right way, or are they do they lose that game twice? Do they feel like they lost their season, no longer in position to make the ACC title game as things currently stand? Are they going to respond the right way? I think that's huge. Then I think, are they playing a good team? Is Virginia Tech a good team? Because Clemson this year, when they play good teams, has not looked like a good team at all. They've really feasted off of bad teams. If you guys ever seen First Things First, tomato cans, something I like to call them. But so in that sense, if Virginia Tech is a good team, there's a chance Clemson again doesn't play well. Third, I have this Virginia Tech home field. This being, not a night game could be big for Clemson, but still Virginia Tech has a good home field advantage, and it's going to be a really big environment, chance to be one of their biggest wins and biggest games in recent history for Virginia Tech. And then finally, the Clemson run game. Because if Clemson doesn't establish the run game with Phil Maffa, they, like we saw in the Louisville game, they weren't in position to make a comeback because they like to run the ball. And if those deep shots downfield aren't hitting, this offense not great, and it kind of builds from that run game, so they have to run the ball well. Who do I have winning? I think Clemson does respond the right way. I think Dabo is going to have this team better prepared than he did in the Louisville game, and I think Clemson wins it 41-21. That offense looking more like the offense we saw against a lot of that lesser competition. Third, we've got Colorado at Texas Tech in a sneaky Big 12 game in terms of who can make the Big 12 title. Texas Tech off a huge win against Iowa State. Colorado coming off a bye. And speaking of those two things, we got this Texas Tech defense as the first key to the game because when Texas Tech played beating Iowa State, holding Iowa State offense that's relatively explosive, not like the most explosive, but has talent. It's only 22 points, really good. But we've also seen them in games against Washington State not play well at all defensively. And it's kind of just been up and down this year. If the defense plays well and limits a Colorado offense that is really explosive with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, Wester, and Jimmy Horn, all those Colorado receivers, Texas Tech can put themselves in a position to win. And then second, I think the scheduling dynamics. This is what I was touching on earlier. Colorado is going to be well rested coming off a bye. Texas Tech coming off a huge win. Yes, they're at home, but it's a letdown spot potentially, I think, especially when you consider Colorado having the bye week before this game. And third, I have the Colorado run defense because Taj Brooks for Texas Tech is one of the best running backs in the country. And we know this Colorado defense, especially early in the year, struggled to stop the run. They've been getting better at it, and if that continues and they force Texas Tech and Baron Morton to beat them through the air, I think Texas Tech could potentially beat you that way, but you'd much rather have them beat you that way than with Taj Brooks just running over this Colorado defense. And then third, I think the QB battle is underrated. With Baron Morton playing, I think this Texas Tech offense through the air is explosive. You got Josh Kelly, Douglas pretty good, decent receivers, and Taj Brooks can catch some out of the backfield as well. And obviously we know what Shedeur Sanders can do at Colorado. So who do I have winning this game? I actually flipped this one just before making this video. I was thinking all going into this, I'm going to pick Texas Tech, but ultimately the way the way Colorado is playing recently against a team like Kansas State, how they stopped the run, coming off a bye week, what they did last time off a bye. Shedeur Sanders in a close game. I think Buffaloes win this one. Give me 34-28. Fourth but not final game we are predicting, and that's going to be South Carolina taking on Vanderbilt. South Carolina, obviously, I think this is this the third week in a row we've broken down their game? No, we predicted them to be A&M. I think LSU was a while back, and Alabama as well. But so we predicted South Carolina over A&M last week, and Vanderbilt we broke down a game a few weeks ago against Texas, and they've continued to surprise a lot of people and play really well. South Carolina unranked. Both teams actually unranked in the committee's ranking. I thought South Carolina should be ranked, and I thought Vanderbilt was really close to being ranked. So like a borderline top 25 matchup in my eyes. Getting into the keys to the game. The first one is again scheduling dynamics, and this is I think we're seeing like a train. We saw it started with I predicted LSU. Well, I thought Ole Miss can maybe overcome the scheduling dynamics and picked Ole Miss, but I pointed out LSU had a huge edge over Ole Miss in terms of scheduling dynamics. Then I just pointed out that A&M had the huge edge over LSU the next week, and then South Carolina had the edge over A&M. So it was like this trade, and now I think Vanderbilt has the edge over South Carolina, with South Carolina coming off that huge win, now going on the road. Again, a letdown spot, maybe not as massive as some of the other scheduling advantages we've seen the past couple weeks in this train, but still not ideal. And then Lenore Sellers, it looked like in that second half, everything was kind of clicking for him, and being a young quarterback like him, you never know when he's going to figure it all out and could become like a star player. There's potential. We just saw that happen for him. Like he just took the leap. Third, I've got this South Carolina pass rush because if Vanderbilt's O-line is not holding up, it could be a long day for Diego Pavia. He's pretty escapable, but Dylan Stewart and Kennard are maybe the best pass rush duo in the country, like I've said in multiple videos, and they could definitely wreak havoc on this Vanderbilt O-line. And finally, I go with the Vandy run game. This includes Pavia. But yeah, just establishing the run on South Carolina so they can't just rush the passer all day, I think is super important. Who do I have winning? I think it's going to be really tight. It was tough for me to pick. Ultimately, Vanderbilt having that home field, South Carolina coming off the big win, I do think it's a letdown spot. I've got Vanderbilt tight, winning another huge SEC game for them, 28-23, and actually stays alive in the college football playoff race, believe it or not, considering they still have LSU and Tennessee upcoming. It's going to be tough, but if they win out, they could get there. But this would be a huge win for the Commodores and continue a magical season in Nashville. Now for our final breakdown. I said Georgia Ole Miss was maybe the biggest game of the day, but probably it is Alabama at LSU. Death Valley, huge game as always. Let's get straight into the keys to the game here. And the first one is Jalen Miller's running ability. We saw when Connor Wigman was pulled in the Texas A&M game and Marcel Reed came in, LSU could not stop the read option. They could not stop Reed from getting to the outside. Jalen Miller, we know, is a super dynamic runner when healthy. He's coming off a bye. You expect him to be healthier. There's a chance he's going to beat LSU with his legs. I expect them to be super focused on that because of what Marcel Reed did, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But first, this LSU run game. Basically, LSU plays their best when Nussmeier doesn't have to do it all by himself, and the run game complements him. The problem is it hasn't done that in every game this year. It's been occasional, and if they can do it against Alabama, they have a much better chance to win. Then this Alabama defense, is it actually improved? It shut down Missouri 34-0 last time we saw them and has a bye week. But Missouri, they knocked out Brady Cook, and with Drew Pine, isn't a really explosive offense. So this will show us if they're really an improved defense. Now retouching on that Jalen Miller running point, I think LSU could commit so much to stopping the run game and Jalen Miller's run game and specifically getting outside that it can once again allow Alabama to open up their deep passing game, which hasn't been as prevalent as it was early in the season. Talking about guys like Ryan Williams, of course, Jeremy Bernard, getting downfield against this and making big plays against this LSU secondary. So who do I have winning this game? This is a huge one. I think an elimination game in terms of the college football playoff, a huge rivalry in the SEC. LSU's got the home field. Alabama, it's been a disappointing season for Kalen DeBoer in his first year, but both teams have everything in front of them still. This is massive, and I think Alabama's going to win it. I think Jalen Miller is going to look more like his Heisman self this game off the bye. I think the defense is better, and I think Alabama wins it 38-28. Well, that's all the predictions we have for this video. Make sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know who you guys have winning these games. As always, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and until next time.